Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kelly, and today is Purple Summer Day, and it is about raising awareness for child sexual abuse. It's the 15th of June, and literally Voicing CSA have asked for everybody to turn purple, wear something purple to show that they stand in support of the Child Abuse Inquiry and Voicing CSA. In this video, I'm going to talk about my own story. So this is me actually coming out properly for the first time and sharing my own experience. I'm a little bit nervous today for some reason. I'm not usually nervous when I'm talking about what is going on as a whole, but when I'm talking about my own personal experiences, it's a little bit different. So basically, we bring our children into this world, and we bring them into this world hoping that they're going to be happy, healthy, and thriving, that we as parents can allow for our children to go and stay with family, friends, be safe in their own home, go to education, to hobbies, interests, play out, be at their friends, and know that they're safe. But unfortunately, we live in the devil's playground, and one thing that he wants is the innocence of children, and sexual abuse has permanent lasting consequences and events. I'm feeling a little bit apprehensive about this, and I know that there are a lot of people who certainly wouldn't sit on a camera talking about such an experience, and there's a lot of people out there who are adults who have been through child abuse and have still never ever told anybody, and they're still dealing with that trauma, and they still can't actually let those words cross from their lips to tell somebody what has happened to them. Or what we usually do is we just say that we've been through sexual abuse, but to actually talk about what that means, what they went through, how that's been, is a really difficult sort of thing to do. And one of the real challenges within this world as well is sexual abuse can mean many things. People tend to associate sexual abuse with violence, with people being pinned and raped and held in a way that makes it very brutal. And this does happen, but the majority of childhood sexual abuse is actually through manipulation. It's done through love. It's done through kindness. It's done through gifts. It's done through what we call grooming. And it will manipulate a child into believing that what is going on is normal. Now, when a child grows up, they only know the world that they're in. They only know the environment around them, the people around them, and the education they had. They don't know any different. So if a child has been through some form of sexual abuse, it's not until they get older do they start to realize that this isn't happening in other people's lives. And that was pretty much my situation. So basically, I would like to see a world where we go back to talking about making love, not about losing virginity. All children are taught to that when we grow up, we lose our virginity. And many children now are losing their virginity at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, the actual legal age for any person to be interactive within a sexual relationship is 18, bordering 16. For the gay community, it's actually 21, because we haven't developed our minds enough, we haven't developed our certainty enough, and we haven't developed our boundaries enough. And this is one thing that is causing issues, because there's a massive big sort of hype on how children should be taught about sex education. Now, if a parent doesn't talk to their child about their body, self-awareness, self-worth, sexual boundaries, what is right, what is not, what some people may do to them, what people may situations they could be in, then you're relying on the school to do this. You're relying on children to learn about sexual education through the schools. But of course, children are not then learning about this until they're in high school. But the damage has already been done. You know, the majority of the stories are coming out now that you're talking about, from babies, from 2, 3 year olds, 6 year olds, even the fact that, you know, people are manipulated from 11, 12, 13. So if we're only teaching our children about sexual boundaries once they're becoming teenagers, it's too late. And it really is too late. And it needs to be taught from the cradle. It needs to be taught from literally when you're changing nappies, into, you know, even in potty training, this could be brought in, you know, even in, I'm a little bit nervous because both of my boys are a little asleep, and I don't want them to wake up while I'm doing this. So I can just sort of see them staring. But I don't want to ramble on too much. So I'm going to talk about my experience, because one thing that's really difficult in the sexual abuse world and in the physical disability world and in many other worlds is people compare whether somebody is worse off than theirs. Now, I can't give you any massive big stories of, you know, I wasn't involved in any grooming rings. I wasn't involved in any satanic rituals. I wasn't offshored through foster care. Mine is very, very different. And mine is a matter that most people don't talk about, because everybody associates sexual abuse with an adult penetrating a child. Now, mine was quite different. So to sort of explain, I've got some pictures and things around me just to use as sort of to give you an idea of a visual. So this is me in 1982. So I would have been 88, 79, 80, 81, 82. So I would have been 4 here in this picture. Now, this house here is my ex-stepmum's house, where my uncle lived, who was only 5 years older than me. So I was originally, well, my mum was 16 when she gave birth to me, and there was a lot of complications with who was going to raise me, where I was going to stay because of my mum's age. And I was actually placed with my nan, and my nan went through with an adoption for me, which my mum and my dad prevented. And I lived with my mum and my dad when I was 3. My mum and dad got married. Now, literally 6 months later, they divorced, and I went to live with my dad and my ex-stepmum. And I would go off and I would see my mum every other weekend. So, and that's happened literally since I was 3 years old. Literally every other Friday, my mum would pick me up. We would go off to my mum's, and I spent the majority of the time with my dad. Now, I was raised on Heatherlands Council Estate, and it's just one massive bigger council estate in the middle of nowhere, and we used to have to get the bus to school. My dad's a builder, plasterer, built houses, and he would literally sort of go out at like 7 o'clock in the morning and move back in the evening. And my mum, Roisin, also would work. So I used to spend a lot of time at my mum's. It gets confusing because everybody's step parents and things like that. Now, Neil was 5 years older than me. So at the age of 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, he would have been 9. And from what I understand, and I've learnt since, there was also sexual abuse going on in the home. And so literally sort of when I grew up with Neil, and he would play out with me incidences that were obviously going on within their own home. And I don't remember the first time, but what I do have is little snippets of images of either a sofa or a place or something that happened or a feeling. And I have a very, very, very clear feeling and vision of knowing that Neil was going to be looking after me one day. And what would happen is he would come over to our home, and obviously the adults would get on with what they were doing, and the children would sort of go up into the bedroom and, you know, sort of be out the way. And mainly during school holidays, mainly birthdays, mainly Christmas, and mainly those sort of holidays. And I can remember very, very, very clearly having a knife underneath the sofa and getting to this point where I used to think, I know how to deal with this. I know how to stop this. My dad was martial arts, and I spent a lot of time training with my dad, and Neil also went to training. And it would be little silly things like he'd go in to do a rice bale throw, but he would sort of grab my breasts and things like that. And I know kids do experiment, of course they do, and kids, you know, they want to show you yours, show you mine, and this is sort of what we've got to protect and what we've got to teach children, that, you know, our bodies are our bodies, and we're there to respect our bodies, and this is our boundary, and we can say no. Now, obviously, a child of my age didn't know anything about penetration, didn't know anything about sex. I didn't know anything about ejaculation. I didn't know what these things were. All I knew was there was this boy, and he kept making me feel really, really uncomfortable. And then later, as I sort of grew up, these incidences got worse, and then it would be sort of, you know, he would stage games, and it might just be that we would have a cardboard box that had been turned into a car, and, you know, we would be driving, and then he would tell me that, you know, you have to get in the back seat, and you do these sort of things. And I don't really want to get into it because I know my boys, and I'm actually struggling to be as detailed as I thought I would be. And it would be these sort of incidences that would lead into sexual sort of reenactments and things like that. Always remember things about his penis, and I don't really want to go into those sort of realms right now, but I can remember it going from being this game to it starting to get into this fear that this matter was going to go on, or I would start to get into situations where my dad would tell me that we were going to Nanny Ann's, or my mum would tell me, and then all of a sudden I would start sort of rearing up, and I would start getting really upset about this, and people didn't really know. I would sort of get told, no, you're going to your nan's, that's it. And I would be that I don't want to go to my nan's, and I used to ask to go and stay at other people's. But then what sort of changed I think I would have been maybe about 6 or 7. And this is going to be really hard for me to talk about, because what I found within the council environment is there was a lot of children like me, and we just sort of like, I don't know, it just become touchy-feely experiments, and I didn't like this, and I kept sort of important that, you know, this is me as a little girl who used to go off to her mum's. I used to go racing, so I'm a really sort of like quite happy, bubbly child. I'm very into photography. You know, I love taking photographs. I love dancing. I love drawing. You know, I was originally quite a girly girl. I was always in pinks. I always used to like having my hair done. And then that sort of changed, and I became very much the fighter. I became the person that wanted to defend myself, be able to stand up for myself, and know that, you know, if anything happened to me, I could deal with that. My dad used to always say to me, it doesn't matter how big somebody is, you can always defend yourself. And my mum Roisin, on numerous occasions, used to say to me, you know, if anybody ever did anything to you that you didn't like, you would tell us, wouldn't you? Now, I put up a post earlier on that, and this isn't just my experience, this is me talking about whole, that when somebody does something to you that you don't want, they will make you feel that if you tell somebody, one, you won't be believed, two, it's your fault, three, if you tell anybody that you'll be taken away, four, if you tell anybody they're going to do something to you. But the biggest thing that they use is you won't be believed. If you tell somebody, they're not going to believe you. If you tell someone, they're not going to believe you. If I keep telling you, if you tell somebody, they're not going to believe you. Eventually, you're going to be panicking how to tell somebody and how to prove what's going on. So when I was about, got a couple of other pictures here, but when I was about 8 or 9, things with my uncle started getting a little bit more because I was spending more time out with him. But the funny thing is we went on a holiday as a family, and Neil took his attention away from me and actually put his attention on one of my cousins. And it was a bit more of a romantic, it was quite public, quite open with the family they were getting on. And funny thing is I actually found it really difficult because I'd had all of these years and years and years and years of, you know, knowing this stuff was going on. And I was laying on the sofa, and I can remember this very clearly. I was in Spain. I'm not 100% sure of the age. I'm just putting all this together at the moment. I've been 8. I'd have been about 7 or 8. And I remember Neil had gone off to play pool with some of my cousins, and I was expecting him to come back and do what it is that he does, and he didn't. But the funny thing is I didn't feel the relief. I actually felt jealousy. And that's really weird. It's a bit like a Stockholm situation, because what people do is they use love, they use normality, they use that you're special, that you're a, you know, that they've chosen you, that you are the one that they've chosen, and they're expressing this love with you. And this happens when adults are doing it to children, children are doing it to children. And then all of a sudden, I didn't feel special anymore. And he turned his focus onto somebody else. And I actually felt rejection, which I spoke with a counsellor about, and apparently is actually very, very, very normal. But when we come back off holiday, everything turned back to normal again. And I started realizing that this was something that shouldn't be going on. But it wasn't until I went to high school, and I've got a picture here of the first day of high school, and quite cute. I went to bow hunt, and I was 11 years old. I started my first day of high school, and I was in the same school as Neil. So I was in the first year, and Neil was in the 5th year. And it was becoming very, very difficult at school because, one, you know, people used to say, oh, you know, your uncle, and all this sort of stuff. But he would grab me at school. And then what had started happening was, at this age, my dad and my stepmom separated, and I actually moved in with my mum. My mum was in a DV relationship at the time, and she was living miles and miles away from my school. So she used to drive me to school. So we used to go from Woking to Liphook. This is Liphook, bow hunt in Liphook. And my mum used to ask my auntie, Nanny Ann, if I could go there after school in order for her to then pick me up. And this caused issues. So I spoke to a friend at school, Rebecca, and I told her what was going on. And it was the first time ever. It was the first time ever I'd sat and spoken to somebody. And this was another pupil at school. And she said to me, Kelly, this is not normal. You need to tell somebody. And I would literally leave school. I would make my walk back to, they'd moved obviously from when we were children to Liphook. And I would have to go there after school. Now, I used to do majorettes, and I used to have a lot of groups, and I would go upstairs to get changed, and Neil was 16 by this time, and I was 11. And I was having to hold myself in the bathroom, keeping the door closed, because he would be trying to push into the bathroom to come into the bathroom. He would want to see me getting undressed, and I would have to keep the door closed, and I was getting really upset, to the point that I started to sort of cause problems of being in this area. In the end, my there's other stuff that sort of went on, but in the end, my Aunt Anne basically told my mum that I could no longer go there. And then the thing was, my mum then was really annoyed with me, because that made things difficult for her, because she was obviously having to drive me all the way over to Lippert, go back, go to work, and come back and come and get me in the evenings. So she sort of needed a complacent child that was quite happy to go, to her nan's. So she found a childminder for me, but it was only around the corner. So I was still dealing with Neil at school, and I was still having to deal with Neil in the afternoons. And when I would go to this childminder's, I mean, she wasn't the nicest woman either. And I would feel really uncomfortable with her son, who was of the same age and in the same group as Neil. And also, I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know whether to go out, do my homework. And of course, then, Neil was in that environment, walking home to school, still sort of pushing these boundaries with me. And I was becoming even more of a sort of defender. And in the end, I actually started moving things in this childminder's house, because I thought, well, hang on a minute, when you start pissing people off, they get rid of you. So eventually, the childminder, I think it was over a pen, I remember it quite clearly, that she'd gone ballistic because a pen had gone missing that was her son's. So she told my mum that I couldn't go in there anymore. And I was really relieved, but my mum wasn't. My mum was not happy with this. And with this, I became this label that I was attention seeking, that I was becoming a problem child, that I was not doing as I was told, that, I was this nuisance, and I was becoming this inconvenience. And it was about this age that I started to get eating disorders. I was already having so many body problems. As people who follow me on other stuff know, I have EDS. And I was starting to really struggle. The thing is, what happened was my mum then decided she had to change jobs. So I left Bow Hunt and I went back to a middle school, and we moved to Farnham. My mum took a job as an au pair, live-in au pair, and I went to St Peter's in Weydon. Now, I have here what is called, nope, that's the wrong one, might be this one. Yeah, I have here. So this is basically, and I can tell you the exact date that it happened. This is what's called a basic information sheet for the police. And the referral was made on the 6th of July, 1990. And because I was at middle school, we were all being prepared for going to high school. I'd already done all the preparation for high school, but this was the schools that I'd gone up to had never done any sex education. So for our sort of coming to the end week of primary school, they had a Just Say No video. And this video was basically teaching children what was right, what was wrong, and how to say no. And I walked out the room, and I was found by one of the teachers stood around the corner with a tear, sort of coming down my eye. And she asked me what was wrong. And all I said was, that happens to me. And then next thing I know, and one of the reasons that I speak out about CSA is because this is what annoys me. Okay. As a child, we go through enough as it is, and it's hard enough to turn to somebody as a child. Most people who've been through sexual abuse as a child don't ever come out about it until they're adults. For a child to come out of it as a child, it's quite a difficult thing. And what happened, I remember being in the classroom. I remember everybody had gone. And then all of a sudden, I was sitting in this classroom and I had police officer, I can tell you exactly who it is because it's on this form. I had, where is it? Karen Haynes, WDC from Farnham Police Station, and Ian Laker, Farnham Police Station. And I don't know what these are, but it was called SPISAC, and that was Hilary Rafter. So I'm assuming that's sort of like social services, stroke police, child protection. And they asked me this question: did he ejaculate? Well, you're asking an 11-year-old, did someone ejaculate? I don't know what that means. And they basically went through stuff. But I did have all this ready. On this paperwork, basically, they've written what happened. But what they're saying is because I was coming out of it after I was in a safe place, that there was no concerns. But the problem is they did go and interview my uncle. They did go and speak to the family, and they all denied it. They all said I was a liar. And then the problem is everybody put this down to the divorce with my parents and what my mum had gone through. And they basically said that I was attention seeking. However, the police didn't. The police never doubted me. In fact, in all of these statements, the police have never doubted me once. I was hoping I was going to have a piece of paper here, but I keep having to take all this paperwork around with me, and I lose things, and things get put into the wrong place. And the police actually said very, very clearly that I was articulate, I was clear, I was very descriptive, I knew what I was talking about. But unfortunately, the family turned against me. And one of the other things as well is they also rang the woman that my mum was living with, and she told them that I was sexually active. Come on, I'm 11 years old. You can't exactly have a go at, an 11-year-old who's sexually active. And my mum was pretty much sacked. They wouldn't let me back into the home. And the other thing was it just completely turned my family upside down. Now, I don't remember going through any examinations, but apparently I did. And my counsellor has told me that I've blocked the examinations because the examination is more severe than what you went through. Because an examination on a child, one, requires if I explain, because I've had another examination done since, and literally you'll be in a very sterile room called a forensic examiner. And what they basically do is if you're a woman, you'll know what a smear is. They do the same sort of thing. So they put this inside you and they check inside. And what they're looking for in a child is to see if the hymen has been broken. And apparently my hymen was still intact, because I hadn't been penetrated by an adult. I'd been penetrated by a child whose penis wasn't of the size that it obviously should have been. So, of course, this then put more doubt in my family's mind, because the police are saying, oh, if she's been through sexual abuse, her hymen will be broken. I did have damage, but this was never brought forward because what they basically said was I was safe. Now, what this caused became one of the most challenging situations in my life, because at the time it was school holidays. We'd just literally come into school holidays. I've been left. So basically since the age of 4 or 5, this has been going on till 11. I finally told somebody, and then everybody shut me down. Nobody wants to talk about it. I remember being at my nan's with my mum, laying in the bedroom in a single bed. I remember having my head on my mum's arm, and my mum sort of talking to me. And, I can remember the sincerity from my mum, who genuinely was holding her daughter, who, didn't know what to do, what to say. And I remember so much love coming from my mum. But then after that day, it was it. It was never to be talked about, never to be brought up again. But I lost my dad, because my dad just sort of, I don't know, he that was it. I didn't see him again after this all came out. And I think the trauma of my dad not being able to cope with this hurt me more than what I'd been through. And my mum would get really frustrated with me because at the end of the day, I was at that point where I really needed people to know and understand and help me deal. And, because I was still dealing with other boys. I was living in a world where, I was a street kid that would go out first thing in the morning, be back at night. And I was around other boys, a lot older boys, and they also were putting me through this. We'd play, there would be games like, I think it's called, what's it called? It's basically a game where you separate into teams, you have a word, each person has a letter, manhunt, and then you've got to catch the other person to get the letter to be able to spell the word. But what boys would do is they would grab my breast, they would try to get my trousers off. And I didn't want to give up the letter, and I certainly didn't want to give up that they were going to put me through this. So I would start fighting, and and then they call you a spoil sport if you didn't sort of engage. And it's all this mind games. It's all about mind games. It's not even about, what they do to your physical body. It's about what they're doing to you here. And I had this sort of attitude that, these people weren't going to break me. But then I used to go down to Headley Club with some of my friends. We used to get on our bikes or go for a walk, and we would go down to the country club and break into the pool and things like that. But on the way home once, we were sat on this verge, and I was with a group of people that weren't necessarily my normal friends, because I wasn't in that world anymore. My parents had separated. I was just going backwards and forwards. And then we were just about to leave, and as we did, I was literally just thrown to the floor. I had one girl holding my head back, and I had one boy in one leg, another boy in the other leg, one holding down my arm and one holding down my other arm, and literally 6 boys. And I say boys because they were aged between 12 and 16, and I was 11, literally took turns each to, hold me down. Initially, they had their hands over my mouth because at first I was kicking off. I was making. There was this girl, Sharon Todd. She was actually about 18, and she literally held my head down and pinned my shoulders with her knees, while each of the boys basically took turns. And I had this feeling. I just decided that I was going to go in myself. And I just looked up at the sky, and I just thought, I can't stop this. There's nothing I can do. I just have to let this carry on. And I basically told myself, they might get my body, but they won't get my soul. And finished, I was literally left laying on this verge with no clothes on, and they'd all walked off laughing, and they'd all thought it was really funny. So I started to walk home, and on the way home, I come across one of the younger lads that was there, who was devastated. He was absolutely devastated, even though he'd partaked in it. He was only 12, and he was crying, and we literally sort of talked and walked home together. And I sort of felt more for him. I've spoken to him about this since, but there was one of them, Gavin Mace, and he was nasty. And I finally got back to where my mum lived, and I was called all sorts of names. I had everybody turn their backs on me. They were saying that I was a slag, I was a whore. I just let everybody fuck me, and I really struggled, and I just disappeared, and I never went back to where my mum Roisin's was again. And I moved into a different life, and I went off to where was it? I think it was at Weydon at the time. I become class captain. I decided that I wanted to be a solicitor and a stunt woman, and I decided that this was a new chapter for me, and I sort of stayed away from people. I didn't get involved in going down to the playground to play with people. I didn't get involved in any form of sort of normal activities. I just got involved in being like class rep and course rep and things like that. And then I went to a school disco. And the funny thing is when I was at Weydon, I was the council house kid in the shell suit. And then I went to another school and I was actually the wealthy child in the chavvy school. So I didn't really fit into anywhere because I didn't have the money, and I had also become this really tarnished person. And I think from that very day, I went inside myself and I stayed inside myself, and I still am. You know, I moved into my head, and this sort of pretty much got shut down. I'm just going to throw something at Dean to wake him up because Elijah's waking up. That alone, that experience changed me forever. But what it did is it prevented me from telling anybody because of my situation that I'd been through before. And then I started acting out. I was getting into situations where I tried putting my hand through a coffee table, and my mum took me to the doctors. I wouldn't tell anybody what I was going through, how it was. I don't know. I just sort of started getting fed up with people. I think my mum had got into a new relationship. She was starting to grab me, getting frustrated with me. In fact, she put me over one of the mine's sofa rocking chair. She just had enough. She just had enough of me. She had enough of not sort of being able to get through to me, not sort of getting what was going on. And then I was shifted off to Germany for a bit, and I went to stay with my auntie. And one of my other aunties actually told me that she had been through sexual abuse, but actually told me by my own granddad. Talk about losing your best friend, hey? I found out that, you know, the man that I knew was my granddad and loved, you know, had actually forced my own auntie to perform oral sex and had abused her. So that fucked me over again. And I could never really talk about it. And if I'd ever mentioned it to my mum, she would say that my auntie was a liar. They've resolved all these issues between them now, and I don't really want to get into it because my mum's made peace with her dad. But I do know it was true. But it changed so much because my mum had always sent me off to my granddad, and that changed how I felt about my mum, knowing that my mum had sent me to my granddad's. My granddad never did anything to me. I'm never claiming that he ever did. But that's what I'm saying, you know, to learn that somebody who you love has done something so nasty changes. And I was still spending time with my granddad while knowing that he had done this to my auntie. And then I'm writing a book on all of this anyway, but this is just more because I'm hoping that there's somebody out there today who hasn't spoke out, who doesn't know how to speak out, and might be able to deal with their trauma. I couldn't have spoken about this sort of stuff like 10, 15 years ago. I would have been an absolute mess. So, you know, I went through lots of different schools, but when I went to Ash Manor when I was 13, actually, I missed a bit. You know, I said to you earlier on that because I was defending myself on all of the streets, I'd become a bit of a boy, just for a bit of a laugh. I decided I was going to become a right boy, a right tomboy. So when I was 15, obviously I was really struggling with my physical body, and I was really struggling with how to deal with boys. And boys were in this whole fingering stage. It was I think it was all about bases. You know, you kiss somebody, fondle somebody, masturbation, and then penetration. I think there was these 4 bases as I went through school. And I'd always kept myself out of these situations, but I would find that people would try to put me in these situations, and because I would not want to get into it, I got a lot of bullying. I was at when I was at at Mill Chase when I was going all the way through this. I would go into the toilets at school and I would find, like Kelly is a slag, or suck my fanny, suck my tits, you have massive rubber lips, I hate your shitty present because I hate you. I can remember seeing it. I can remember getting it in a birthday card. I remember getting egged. And then when I was sort of coming into my final sort of year of school, boys would sort of always be coming around you. And I was in sexual relationships left, right, and centre. It was easy. I was easy. I didn't know how to get out of these situations. So I was. There's so much in between. There's so many different stories, but I just want to bring this into sort of why I then went into foster care, and I've got some bits here. And then when I was in high school, my little sister had thrush, and my mum told me that the doctor had said that there was a chance that obviously my sister had been abused. My mum refuses to claim that she says this. I know where I was stood. I know where I was in the house, in the hallway. I know that I was looking at the Desert Orchid picture as she said this. And I know how I felt, because all of a sudden I thought, hang on a minute, my sister's only a baby. And, it destroyed me. Mum never spoke to me about it again. And I don't know what the truth was. But I spoke to somebody at school about it, one of my friends, and I said, it can only be family or a childminder, because there was nobody else. There was nobody else. She wasn't at school age. She'd only been to a childminder, but my best friend at the time's parents had been childminding. And next thing, my friend had said that I had accused her of doing this. And wasn't the case. So then I ended up in fights at school. I was getting fights left, right, at school. My mum was telling school that I was lying, that hadn't been said. And eventually, I was doing PE one day, and the girls had put all my clothes in the shower. And I school bullying, the cunts, aren't they? And I was having to walk down the corridors knowing that this was going to end up in a fight. I was going into the changing rooms, and I was finding that the boys were accosting me in there. And in the end, I found myself on the window ledge at school. I couldn't take it. School were going to call my mum. I kept saying that, if you ring my mum is going to go mad. She's had enough of all the drama. That's all my mum ever says, is drama. And, my mum had made it very clear that if I got into trouble at school again, I was in trouble. I was scared of what my mum would say. And I just said to the teacher, if you ring my mum, I remember being in the classroom and she was going to pick up the phone. I'm going, if you pick up that phone, I'm going to jump out that window. And then next thing, she picked up the phone and I'm edging towards the window. And then next minute, I'm on the window ledge. I've got loads of people outside singing Crisscross, Daddy Mac's going to make you jump. There's all this drama going on, and all I'm thinking is, I just want the world to shut up and I just want people to leave me alone. I had a really lovely boyfriend at the time who sort of talked to me, and I sort of tried to tell somebody, what had been going on. And then next minute I know, I'm being forced into the back of an ambulance with sort of my legs holding from not going into the ambulance. And I've got everyone telling me I'm off to this place called Epsom. And then next thing, we've got social services in. Nobody's talking to me through all of this. Everybody is having meetings, and having meetings with my mum, having meetings with my stepdad. My dad is refusing to get involved. I only know this now because I've seen the paperwork since. And basically, I'd gone off to Holland with one of the headmasters, and obviously some other people, but the headmaster was one of our neighbours. Deputy headmaster was one of our neighbours, and I tried talking to him about it. I tried to sort of say, look, how do I deal with this? And it was quite an adult conversation. I'm like, look, how do I deal with these boys? How do I deal with what's going on? Because, you know, I'd been through all of these different things, you know, even, you know, drum and bugle corps, and it was happening there. Older boys, wherever I was going, older boys, older boys, older boys, you know. I was 11 having, you know, sexual relationship with 19-year-old boys, 21-year-old boys, more men, really. I couldn't really tell you between the ages of 11 and 14, 15, how many sexual relationships I'd had. I couldn't tell you. And if I sat down and worked it out, I think I would really struggle with that fact. And so anyway, eventually I put myself in foster care because my mum was getting very grabby with me. She was losing her temper with me. And then literally one day, you know, my mum went to grab me and I flew at her and I told her straight, you'll never touch me again. And all these people that were in my life and what their roles were, I just thought they were all to do with the police. I didn't even really know what police were because I didn't live in a world where we saw many police. It's not like now where they're just everywhere. Yeah, next thing I was farming with Sue and Roger. And while I was there, this is how insensitive this system is, right? This is a post-it note. A fucking post-it note. 12th of April. Visit to Sue Ward, R.E. Kelly. Out of the blue, not happy, sullen and moody night before. Video triggered something. S. Sue. He is crying. What's going on? This is me. I've got to talk to someone. Floods of tears. I've got to talk. Why did they do it to me? I feel dirty. I'm still left with the feelings. It's not my fault. S. When did it start? K. Too little. When I was at St. Peter's, say no to strangers upset me. Head approached her. Neil had started to make her do things to her younger cousin. Told social worker and police came. Cousin's no memory of it. Her family was very pro-Neil and supported him. Tried to tell mum, but not in a direct way. Felt let down by everyone. Another incident in Borden when... I don't have the rest of that post-it note. So basically, while I was at... and I'll show you. This is me. While I was at school, in my final years at school, I was called Moose, Minger. And my mum used to just say people are just jealous. I really did go through the battles of it. And I finally got expelled. So this is... I look so happy, don't I? And I genuinely look really happy. It's amazing what mask you can wear, isn't it? Because inside I was taking overdoses. I was literally going to bed at night and downing any pills that I could find, praying and hoping that I wouldn't wake up the next morning. And unfortunately I would. And then my mum started reading my diaries and I'd get a bit upset about this. I'm trying to throw my pictures at things because I was waking up. And yeah, I'm losing my flow, I'm afraid, but it's not very easy to do this. So, and I'm going to be shutting off in a minute because Elijah really is going to be waking up. Yeah, I have other paperwork here as well, where the social worker said, I'll show you. I'll show you where it is after I've read it. So this was from social services on the 28th of the 1st, 94. So in March, I'd been complaining that I've got difficulties with my hands. March 93, there was the window ledge incidents. June 93, I was remitted to school. June 93, I'm starting to have problems with my jaw. The 14th, the 9th, 93, a fight with another girl. Allegations of what I was talking about with my sister. The 1st of the 10th, 93, withdrawn from mass for destructive behaviour. October 2093, possible move to Borden. And then the social worker writes, Kelly, quite attractive in a street corner kind of way, believed to be sexually active, not withdrawn, extremely unpopular, with no with a note of peers, bizarre behaviour, makes up stories, not trustworthy or reliable. Can you see it for yourself? Hopefully you can see that. So that's basically how the system treated me. And literally from that day, I would say I was quite an attractive, sort of 15-year-old, but I didn't feel that way. In fact, when I looked at myself, I didn't recognise myself. In fact, I found it very difficult to look in a mirror. It's only recently that I've been able to do so. And I dealt with a lot of, I used to think that people can see it. I used to think that people knew. And then all of a sudden, you just get thrown this label, sexual abuse victim. And that's who you are. You're a sexual abuse victim. Or you're a liar and attention seeker. And my paperwork is absolutely full of, who is that? I think I had it here. No, it's a different one. I mean, I've got it here. If you can just see this behind me. I have all this paperwork behind me. So this paperwork basically talks about me being a liar and attention seeker, constantly asking for help about sexual abuse. It's all the way through it. All the way through. Liar and attention seeker, talking about sexual abuse. Liar and attention seeker. And even the teacher says that there'd been an investigation and I was lying. And that really isn't true. My son's waking up, so I'm going to leave this and just sort of say that, in fact, actually, I'm not going to leave it. Just stay there a minute. Hey, sorry, I just wrap up now because obviously the kids have woken up. And I don't get the same support. People don't support me doing this stuff, so I really don't get the help. So anyway, the reason that I wanted to speak out is because what happened as a child has lasting consequences and effects. And, as a 17-year-old, it made my life very difficult. As a 19-year-old, it made my life very difficult. And obviously my child comes first, so I might have to switch this out and finish this later if need be. But Dean is actually sat there and I really need him to take Elijah, but Shiloh, but I don't think it's going to happen. No. Sorry? Okay. So anyway, that's completely sort of thrown what I was saying. I know I only get a small window to do this stuff when the kids are asleep. But the whole point of today is to raise awareness for obviously the amount of children that are still going through this and to help them have that voice. And, the innocence of a child is so important. And we shouldn't be raising children to have to go through years of therapy. Children have a right to, their own lives and their own purposes and passions. And what my experiences did is it pushed me into a world of psychology. At 17, I went to college to study law, child psychology, and then I went on to do my degree in psychology and counselling, purely because I was so sick and tired of all of these therapists and counsellors that were trying to get through to me. And, I really had enough of it. And I wanted to know what these people were trying to do and what the problem was. I'm sick of people labelling us child abuse victims. I thought this is all done. I was married. I had my own children. My life was in a great place. My husband at the time knew my past. I had accepted that my parents were never going to accept what happened to me. I was in a good place. And then all of a sudden I triggered off with you know, eating disorders, and I was struggling with physical body, and I was finally diagnosed at 21. And all this got all blurred, all confused, you know, because nobody was listening to me about my body, nobody was believing what I went through as a child. That's because nobody was listening to me about my body, nobody was believing what I went through as a child. And then, you know, finally at 21, it all clicked together. You know, I'd got the help that I needed as a child. I'd got the diagnosis that I needed. I'd moved on with my life. I was dealing with my physical condition that I needed. I'd moved on with my life. I was dealing with my physical condition. I was being a mom. And, you know, it's this same control. You know, my partner at the time didn't want me to go to university. Or emotional blackmail, or tell you they're going to leave you. And for somebody like me, when people tell me they're going to leave me, then obviously you end up doing what they want you to do. But literally, you know, I come back, you know, me and my husband, we moved into England. You know, my life was quite settled. And then all of a sudden, you know, it all sprung back. I ended up in a situation where somebody had assaulted me. But I went to the Safe Centre in Preston, and I had 2 years of therapy. And we talked about boundaries, and I really wanted to do a video about sexual boundaries and things like that, but obviously this has made it a little bit difficult. I don't like my children on camera with me, and certainly not talking about this. But also, what people also need to realise is it isn't just happening to little girls, it's happening to little boys. And there are a lot of adult men out there who have been through sexual, physical, emotional abuse, and it's harder for a man to speak out than it is for a woman. You know, women are quite lucky. You know, we can talk to our female friends. I tend to be the person that in the clubs and stuff where people tend to, you know, break down and start talking to me. It's not that easy for men. And also what people don't talk about is those that got away, because not all people get to carry on with the act. Some people, they escape and they get away from it. But look, I mean, while he's here, I mean, how beautiful is this little boy? How special is this little boy? And, you know, all of our children, every single child in this world has a right to, you know, to live free. But unfortunately, when you look at all the children that are out there now, you know, at 11 years old, they're sexually active. At 12 years old, they're sexually active. The way that the boys and the girls are behaving now is absolutely atrocious. The way the girls dress, and I'm not saying because of the way somebody dresses, they deserve what's going on. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's no self-respect.
There's no self-respect because their parents are not teaching them well. Okay.
Okay. Right. And that's what I was about to say. Yeah, that at the end of the day, we shouldn't be relying on the education system to teach our children. We should be doing it ourselves as parents. You know, none of my children have ever been through anything like that, and they never ever will, because as parents, it's up to us to safeguard our children. It's not about having a system that safeguards children. It's about having family and friends. And they do say that obviously the majority of this stuff comes from within families. Dean's just woken up, and he's like a roaring lion when he wakes up. So I'm going to give him some chance to wake up. And this has completely thrown where I was and where I was going with this. And it's all going to be in the book anyway. So if you really do want to know, you know, how I overcame it, what work I did with the counsellor, and then obviously how all of this got thrown back at me, you know, in 2012 when Aaron and Faith were taken. Something that, you know, I've never seen this paperwork until my kids were taken, which built the foundations for them to remove Aaron and Faith for me. Because unfortunately, psychology believes that those who are abused go on to abuse. And then obviously, because I'm a child who's been through what I have and I have my rejection issues, I'm labelled a narcissist. And yes, you know, I have my issues, I have my traumas, and sexual abuse traumas for life. You know, you do overcome it, you do heal from it, but it is baggage you carry for the rest of your days, and you just have to learn to live with it. And my way of doing it, it was obviously to push for the child abuse inquiry. And, you know, if children can't come forward and speak out, then, you know, it's time for us adults that have been through it to be the voice for them. And if we can push for this system for more education and more awareness, and not about the abuse, let's get away from the abuse. Let's just talk about the joy that children should be living in, the happiness that children should be living in. You know, let's teach boundaries in a fun, safe way. This shouldn't be a dark, gloomy, depressing world of voicing child sexual abuse. What this should be about is voicing children's joy, children's freedom, children's you know, love, and teach children healthy relationships. And if we do that, we eliminate the problem, because the more we educate our children on boundaries, the less that these boundaries can be penetrated, and the less that people can, you know, do, and the more that people can speak out about things, the quicker people can get the right help. And if we didn't have this removing system that we have right now, then, you know, obviously, you know, people would be able to come forward. There's a lot of us that need counselling. There's a lot of us that need to talk about things. You know, there's a massive amount of statistics of people who are going through suicide. And the only reason that somebody is going through suicide is because they have a trauma that they can't talk about. They'll have a low self-worth, or, you know, there'll be something going on that they feel that they can't control. And that's sort of pretty much why most people fall into feeling suicide. So, you know, by us all doing what we're doing, by turning purple, by talking about CSA, you know, by talking about our experiences, then hopefully for every one of us that does that, that will enable another person to do it. And it isn't about us throwing our demons on you either. It's about, you know, it's about us showing that it is okay to come out. The system isn't great on how to deal with it, but it does need to change. The way it's done with reporting with the police needs to change. The way a child is counselled needs to change. Anyway, I've got to go and deal with my son, so I just wrap it up. But obviously, because it's a YouTube video, I need there to be a bit of an ending. So, oh, dearie me. On that note, my son is crying because he needs a cuddle from his mummy, and he's hungry and he's tired, and that should be the only reason that any child is crying. So I'm going to love you and leave you and sign off out. Catch you later. Bye. Sorry, I fucked this up. I wasn't expecting it.